Okay, so welcome to another lecture, and the topic for this lecture is so these things we have seen in the last class. So this lecture we are going to talk about these topics related to dry journal bearing and axial friction. Okay, so as we have seen in the introduction, bearings are extremely essential for any, not just mechanical object, but even for biological objects, biological entities like all of us. We all have, so you can say that so many bearings in our bodies, in our body. So in our neck, shoulder, knee, elbow, right? So anywhere where you observe relative rotational motion of two objects, we have to provide a bearing to so that there is a relative motion that can take place. So here you can see that we have, let's say, two pulleys or two wheels. So these are mounted on a shaft. The shaft is also called as an axle. So this is the so this is called as shaft or axle, and obviously you can see with this green arrow it is going to rotate in a particular direction. Now a rotating object cannot be just left in air, right? So it has to be supported on a stationary object, and so this is stationary. And to support a rotating object on a stationary object, we have to provide something what is called as bearing. And that is what we will discuss in this class in detail. In some detail, I mean, bearing again is a big topic, and a lot of different types and a lot of different things. We are going to talk about what is called as journal bearing. So journal bearing, what is a journal bearing? Journal bearing is if you see it from the side view, you'll see this is the section of the side view, and this part is called as journal bearing. Now in this you have this outer casing, and then the shaft is also is another name for the shaft is also called as journal, right? So that is another name for journal. So this inside is a journal, and this is rotating in this bearing. Now, so let us say if I represent this shaft or journal here with this blue color. Now there is a very small gap, although it is I have exaggerated to show you, but there is a small gap between the casing. So the red one is the casing and the shaft, and generally this clearance or this gap is provided with lubrications, right? So there is lubricants in this clearance, and that's why we use oil, engine oils or grease or other kinds of lubricants to lubricate machines. And when there is lubricant, the friction here is definitely reduced quite significantly, and those friction analysis is dealt with. We have to do. There is a separate subject called as tribology, which basically deals with lubrication, deals with bearings and so on, and particularly fluid dynamics or fluid mechanics. So we are not going to talk about these types of things, but we are going to talk about dry journal bearings. So let us say the lubrication is not there, or it is partially there. If there is a metal to metal contact, then the analysis that we are doing is fine. Okay. So so if we see, so the journal bearings are provided to have lateral support to the rotating shafts, right? So there is an axial direction, and perpendicular to axial direction is called as a lateral direction or transverse direction. and to provide support in that lateral direction, we use the bearings. Now, the friction resistance of fully lubricated bearings depends on clearance, speed, viscosity of the lubricants, etc. Again, this analysis is beyond the scope of this course. But for partially lubricated axles and bearing, we will assume a direct line contact and we will do the analysis. Now, what we want to do, we want to find the moment M required to maintain the motion. So here there is, you can visualize that we need to apply a moment M to rotate this bearing even at a constant speed. So we need to provide some small moment, maybe small, but we need to provide a moment to make this rotate at a constant angular velocity, and that's what we want to do the calculation. Okay, now let us say if maybe I'll go to the OneNote application. Okay, can you see the OneNote?
Yes, sir.
Now it's gone.
Yeah, I'm again sharing. Okay. So this is the bearing for which we want to do analysis. And let us say when this is at, everything is at rest, right? So if things are not moving, and I am just showing, this is the journal and this is the bearing or the outer casing. Oh, gosh. Okay. Now, if nothing is taking place, then there is a load W which acts vertically downward on the center of the shaft, and there will be a reaction R, which is which is going to be applied on this vertically upward. Now, as it starts rotating, so let's say as we start rotating this shaft, then the reaction force is going to shift from this position. So if I start rotating this thing, then you will see that this black shaft is going to climb up the journal a little bit. Again, the figure is not a very good figure. Let me draw it again. Again, not a very good figure. But the idea is that if I start rotating the shaft clockwise direction, it will try to roll up the outer casing, the purple color casing, and the point of contact, which was, again, the diagram is not good. Initially, the point of contact was just vertically downward. So this point of contact will move towards the right, something on the right. And now if I see the force balance, the load W is anyway acting downward, but now this reaction is going to be applied at some other position. And this reaction, which has got both, this is the net resultant from the surface, which includes friction. that will pass through the center. And if we balance moment about this point, let's say point A, then there is an unbalanced moment due to W, and therefore we have to apply an extra moment M to make this system in balance. And this moment can be calculated. So I'll again show better diagrams for you to understand. Okay, so if you can see this figure in the PowerPoint presentation, so when the shaft starts rotating, the net reaction, it will be vertical. Yeah, so I think I made a mistake there. So this is just the normal reaction, but actually, yes, for force balance, it has to be vertical. So let me correct it. So this reaction or the net resultant is going to be vertically upward, something like this. So that there is force balance that takes place, right? So this resultant has got two components. One is the normal reaction, which is in this direction, and then it has got a moment, a force, friction force F. So it has got a normal reaction and a friction force, which adds up to give you a vertical reaction R. Now this balances the forces in the vertical direction. W is equal to R, but at the same time, W and R, they form a couple because they are distance separated by a distance. So therefore, we have to apply an external moment M on the shaft to make it rotate at a constant angular velocity. So if you again go to the PowerPoint, yeah. So this is what we have drawn there. Now this ideally the reaction would have been along N, but reaction or the resultant has moved by an angle phi, which is your friction angle, as we have discussed in the last few classes. Now, if things are moving, if there is a sliding contact, then we will call this as kinetic friction, phi k. And if there are things are static, then we'll call as phi s. In this case, of course, there is a relative motion. So this is the moment. And now to calculate the moment, yeah, so reaction line of action does not pass through the shaft center. This we have already seen. Now, physically, the contact point is displaced as the axle climbs up in the bearing, right? So the point of contact is now a different point, let's say point P here. Another exaggerated view of the same bearing case is something like this. So here is your bearing casing, and then you have a shaft. And now this point has moved towards right. And now to do this moment calculation, I can balance the moment about about any point. And let's say if I balance moment about point O, then this is equal to R cap, the resultant R times R sine phi. So this is R is the radius and phi is the angle. So this is R sine phi. And if since phi are small, we can assume sine phi equal to tan phi equal to mu. And therefore, this can be approximated like this. And for graphical solution, R must be tangent to the friction circle. So this small circle that you can see here, where the net resultant force is a tangent. So this circle is called as a friction circle in case of dry-journal bearings. So I think that's about the analysis for dry-journal bearing. So if you have got mu is known, then we can calculate this as R, and R is same as your W, right, from force balance. So your moment can be calculated by the following expression, which is W times radius times the coefficient of friction. So that is the moment required to rotate the shaft or axle at a constant speed. Okay. Now the next analysis, which is which flows from the same thing, is the analysis of thrust bearings, and which will also lead to clutch, disc brakes, and other kinds of analysis. So the previous bearing that we have seen was a tri-journal bearing, and in this case we talked about transverse load or lateral load. In case of thrust bearing, we talk about axial load. So suppose this geometry, if this geometry were to be vertically standing, right? So currently it appears it is horizontal, but let us say if I want a system where this has to be vertical, then I need a axial thrust here to support this shaft. And in such a case, we will need a force in, along the axis of shaft. And that is what thrust bearings do. So now here you can see in the case of thrust bearing, we need, a force from along the axis of the shaft. We want to support the axis of the shaft along its axis. So we can have either end bearings, just put an end surface, and we'll try to make sure that this is as smooth as possible. That is one way. Another way
Is it vertical? Is it vertical?
Yeah, so in
or
this case,
horizontal?
this is we are applying a force horizontally. If you want to draw another diagram, you can draw it like this as well. So the idea is, if P is, in this case, P is like this, in this case, P is like this. So there is an axial force. So don't just get confused by horizontal or vertical, but the idea is axial force. In case of normal bearings that we have seen, we have load which is transverse. So this is, normal journal bearings or other kinds of bearings. So this is the symbol for bearing, right? So this is the normal bearings, or not, I would say normal bearing, but journal bearing. Okay. So for axial load, we need some system, something like this. We can have end bearings, or we can have collar bearings. And now if you see the force, the friction coming here, it is going to be, so there is the whole friction is going to be distributed on this surface. And we want to do the analysis for this. So thrust bearings are there to provide axial support, and the same phenomena we will see takes place in clutch, in disc brakes, disc clutch, and these other systems. Now, to do an analysis for thrust bearing, let us consider a following geometry here. So if I have got a load P acting vertically downward, not vertically, I mean actually, right? It's acting actually. And we want to calculate what moment M should be applied so that it supports this load P, and at the same time rotates at constant angular velocity. So we want to calculate moment, externally applied moment M, so that this object is in equilibrium. Now, if we see the cross-section area of this surface, which is in contact with this ground, there is a friction force that is going to act on this surface. Okay, so let us see the geometry first of all. So we are right now considering a hollow shaft, R1 to R2. The axial force is P, which is applied axially, and the contact, the friction is applied from inner to outer radius, and And now here is a assumption. So we are assuming that there is a uniform pressure between the two surfaces. In other words, we are assuming that there is the same coefficient of friction throughout the surface, throughout the annular ring. There is the same coefficient of friction and same pressure which is taking place. So now with this analysis, if we write the small friction force here, right? So if I have a small elemental area of arc length r d theta and dr, so dr and rd theta, then I can write the small force as coefficient of friction times the normal force. So the small normal force that will act here is the total force P divided by the total area. So that is the kind of average pressure. This multiplied by small delta A. So that is the our assumption that we have taken. And with this assumption, we can write this small friction force multiplied by small r will give us the small moment required to to move this small area, right? And which can be simplified to something like this. So I mean, this area is pi r2 square minus r1 square. And after this, we can integrate this expression. So this is what we have done here. So in numerator, this dA term is r d theta dr, and therefore you get r square in the numerator, r square dr d theta. Other things are all constant, it comes out. So we integrate it, and this is the expression for the moment that is required to do this moment that is applied if I have to support an axial load P and still the system moves at a constant angular velocity, right? So if the friction were not to be there, then yes, I don't need any external moment. But if the friction is there, then this is the expression that requires to be applied. Now, a very nice extension of this will be what is called as a clutch. So clutch has got basically two plates which are together, which forms clutch. So in clutch, basically you will have two discs. So this is one disc, another disc. The idea is here your power is coming from the transmission of the engine. Power from engine. And here the power is going to gear and gearbox. So clutch is particularly useful for manual transmission systems, which most of our Indian cars and most of the cars that you might have observed works. Yeah, I cannot hear you.
Of our Indian.
Hello. Is there anything important, or let me complete the lecture and then you can ask, Nikhil?
Yes, sir, sure.
Okay. So yeah. So in most of the manual transmission cars that we all encounter, we have to press a clutch pedal to before when you shift a gear. So the idea is to engage and disengage power transmission. So okay, so the idea is we want so generally in normal operation these two are kind of very jointly pressed together. They are joined together and in normal operation. So there is a friction. So in normal operation, they are kind of just stick together, and they stick together because of friction. So there is a lot of normal force that is applied here through some other mechanisms, and this place has got a very high friction. And therefore, if I apply a certain moment m, this moment will be transmitted, and both things will move at same angular velocity, right? So both the shafts are moving at same angular velocity because they are sticking together because of very high friction. Now, when you change gear, there is a mechanism by which it introduces a certain gap here in between. So when you press a clutch pedal, it provides a certain gap here. And when you provide a gap here, this shaft is still moving with an angular velocity omega because it is connected to the engine, but this shaft is free. So because of disengagement of the clutch plate. And if this is free, now you can change your gears freely. And once you change your gear, you again release the clutch pedal. The moment you release your clutch pedal, again, this will stick together and the situation will become like the blue figure. And again, the same omega will be transmitted to the shaft. Okay, so that's the the basis of clutch mechanism. And now we can calculate using these equations, we can calculate what is the maximum moment that I can transmit through the shaft without causing a slip, right? Or I can calculate what is the maximum moment m that we can apply so that just the slipping is just about to happen between the two clutch plates. so this is the analysis for clutch. And again, similar things will extend to the disc brakes as well. Okay. For full circle, yeah. So if I'm talking about if inner radius R1 is 0, right? So if I have got discs which are not annular but full circle, then this expression is if R1 is equal to 0, it simplifies to a simple equation given by this. Or disc clutch, I already explained in you on the previous slide. So that was disc clutch. Okay, now let's talk about a very important concept called as wheel friction. And I think this is my last slide. I have to do it on one note. So wheel, as you can see, it's one of the most important inventions of human civilizations. Although there is no such clear person or date associated with its invention, it is very, very from the history of mankind. Now let me I have to explain it on one note because I'll not be able to explain here. Okay, so the topic is what is called as wheel friction, and it's a very important topic, and there are two types of wheel friction that we are going to encounter here. The first friction will be due to the axle friction, which we have seen just now, axle friction plus the surface or ground friction. That is one kind of friction that the wheel encounters. The second friction is what we will encounter is due to the deformation of wheel and ground at point of contact. Right. So these are the two categories of wheel friction, or the friction that the wheel of a moving car or vehicle is going to encounter. And this is also the second category is also called as what is called as rolling resistance. Okay. Now let us try to understand these things one by one. So first is the axle, the friction due to axle. Now, let us say if I have got a, a nice circle or a nice object which is just rolling, which we call as pure rolling. I'm sure you have heard these terms and studied these terms. And these terms we will again study probably in the dynamic section. But for now, you understand pure rolling means this point of contact has no motion, no motion in along the surface. So there is no relative motion between ground and the wheel point. And if it's a very nice straight ground and so on, then if I have a condition V is equal to omega R, then we say it's pure rolling. So in case of pure rolling, we know that there is no friction that is going to act, right? So if there is a load W, then there will be a normal reaction N, and that is end of the story, right? So there is, if everything is, ground is fine and it's pure rolling is taking place, then that is the case. Now, what we are considering is a vehicle. So it is not just an a ball rolling or something like that, but we have got a vehicle. So let us consider a cycle wheel, right? So if I have got a cycle tire and I'm considering the front wheel of the cycle, right? So I'm not considering the rear wheel. Considering the front wheel of cycle, which is free to rotate, right? So let us say this is the, some kind of a system like this. Now, due to this axle and bearing, so you can see that this red color is the axle, and between this axle and your wheel, there will be some kind of bearing here, right? Which is what we have studied just now. So if this wheel, green wheel, has to rotate, let's say clockwise, so this cycle is moving in the front direction, and if this has to move in the front direction, this wheel has to rotate clockwise, and if this, so with respect to axle, this green wheel is rotating clockwise, and therefore there will be a the friction force. Now I am drawing the free body diagram of the wheel separately. So this is the wheel that we are talking about. Now, with respect to axle, this is rotating clockwise. So therefore, there is going to be a moment applied, due to the bearing or due to the axle friction. So there is an axle friction here, and which will oppose the relative motion. And this moment is going to be anti-clockwise like this. Okay, so this is due to the axle friction. The next load is the vertical load of the cycle or of the cycle plus wheel combined. So this vertical load is W that will act downward. There is a normal reaction which is there to balance the W. But now if I balance moment about any point, you can see that we have got an extra moment M, which is anti-clockwise, and this is due to the bearing. To balance this moment M, we have to apply the ground is going to apply a friction force, which is small f like this, and simultaneously we have to apply a force P to the wheel horizontally to make it rotate. And now P and F, they form together a couple which is clockwise to balance the moment M, which is anti-clockwise. And now this system is in equilibrium, right? So now I can say that this cycle or this wheel is moving or can move with a constant velocity, and things are nicely in equilibrium. So therefore, from here, we can calculate your friction force from moment M, right? So this thing and the horizontal force P that we need to apply to move things, right? Just like, so for example, if you cycle is one such case where you have to drive a rear wheel, but let's say if you consider a very simple example of a cart, right? Or in Hindi, I'm sure all of you have seen, thela, right? Thela gadi. So there are 4 wheels which are free to move, and when a person pushes that that thing, the force P required is basically to overcome the bearing moment or the axial friction. Again, axial friction depends upon your type of bearing. So you can have very, very poor quality bearing and you can have a lot of moment, or you can have a lot of research goes on in bearing and, to develop better and better, smoother bearings where this force is as minimal as possible. So, so this is the about the friction force, which is due to the axial friction. The second, let's quickly move to the second type of force, which is due to the deformation in copy this. Okay, so the second is what is called as rolling resistance, and rolling resistance is due to the deformation in wheel and ground. So when your wheel is on the ground, it is, so ideally for pure rolling we say there is a point contact and all these things are very nice, but in reality it's not the case. There is a certain deformation that takes place, right? So I'll just show it with, so so the idea is that you have got a contact over an area, not just a point contact, and there is a deformation in wheel as well as on the ground. And because of that, so now if I consider the forces, so let's say this is the vertical load W, there will be a distribution of forces which will have over the area, right? So there will be a distribution of forces which will, let us say, act as a resultant R. So there is a distribution of forces, let's say, which will have an equivalent force R, which will act, let's say, at point B. Point A is vertically downward. So now we don't know what this thing R is going to be, but if I balance moment about point B is equal to 0, then we see that there is an unbalanced moment, right? So there is a anti-clockwise moment about point B. So to balance this, we have to apply an external force P here to create a clockwise moment, and which will balance the moment. And so this force has to be applied externally. And now I can say that P times the radius R is equal to W times small distance B. So this distance is called as B, which is called as your coefficient of rolling resistance. So this sometimes is called as coefficient of rolling resistance. And yeah, so B I can say is P times R divided by W. So it is the ratio of the force that we need to apply divided by the load W times the radius of the wheel. And that's your coefficient of rolling resistance. And now this topic is again fully not yet understood. Still research is going on these topics. And but yeah, this is, as of now, this is what people are so this B can vary from 0.25 mm. So if you have steel wheels on steel rails, right? So if you have trains, so in that case, your B value is very less. So this is for steel wheel on rails. And if you have same steel wheel but on soft ground, it can be around 12 centimeters, so quite large. So I think that's all for for this topic, and that's all for this lecture as well. So we'll close this discussion.